Jay Johnson,
Yeah,
welcome to Human Edge podcast. I'm really excited to be hosting you today. How are you going?
I'm amazing. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being with us here today. You're the CEO of High Frequency Highway. You are a high performance coach, but you're also somebody who's been an Olympic level athlete. Nobody can ever tell your story better than you can tell it yourself. Outside all the accolades, who is Jay Johnson?
Yeah, Jay Johnson, he's a multi-dimensional person. He loves to not only show his body athleticism, but his mind's athleticism, right? And been an entrepreneur and athlete since I can remember. And I just love combining all my talents and getting the maximum potential out of life.
Amazing. So, Jay Jr., I want you to imagine this is your private performance diary, and I have just opened it on page one. What is the most
Okay.
unfiltered sentence on today's page about the state you are in right now?
The state I'm in right now is living my dreams. I think that's like in short, that's truly how I feel is just
Yeah.
living my dream life.
Mm. You said that state is everything. When did you first realize your internal state was running your life more than your talent, your training, or your to do list?
I would say my senior year of high school is really when it clicked for me. Um, I dealt with some mental health issues going into college and quickly found out that like all is mind, right? You could
Mm.
have everything going for yourself in your life, and if your state or your mindset is negative, you are still going to be in a negative state. So I really had to take a step back and start to rewire my mind and my subconscious mind to see the good things out of life, have deep gratitude, and tap into the power of the mind. And being an athlete, you really have to tap into that mind over matter, especially being a sprinter like myself. Um, Pushing your body to its limits. You know, when your body thinks it's tired, you really are probably at 70%. So
Mm.
you gotta flip that switch and turn it up a notch even more. Even if you feel tired, you gotta keep going.
Right. So how did your story end up being an Olympian athlete? What was that like? How did you come there?
Yeah, yeah. So came out of high school fastest in the nation, and was built off of my speed, and I fell in love with running and being outside all the time. And um I didn't really take track that serious until my junior year of high school,
Mm.
when the football coach made us actually start running track, and started to fall in love with the sport, and knowing that time is what matters, right? And getting your time down will move you up in the ranks versus like a sport like football or soccer where there's a lot of politics and things of that nature. Track, if you're fast, you're fast. Um, and yeah, basically continued to work on my speed, and then I got invited to the Olympic trials team for flag football because they saw my speed. So it was kind of like a reverse where I was mainly football, then went to track, and then was mainly track, and then was asked to then be a part of the Olympic team for flag football. So the first year is going to be in the Olympics is 2028. So training every day to get prepared for that moment.
Amazing. So then how did you come to form the high frequency highway?
Yeah, so high frequency highway came together because as an athlete that deal with ADHD, I didn't like taking the normal pharmaceuticals because it basically would stop my appetite. I wasn't able to eat. And if I couldn't eat, I couldn't train the way that I needed to perform at the level I wanted to. So I stopped taking my medication, even though it really did help me focus. It stopped other aspects of my life, or not stopped, but like it slowed me down. So I started researching alternatives. And one thing that truly helped me was frequency. And I would normally go to YouTube to listen to like lo-fi music or these like focus frequencies, but then you get hit with an ad, and then you start to notice how different YouTube videos, even though it's the same frequency, it sounded different. So I'm like, how are these the same frequency? So I was like, there has to be a better solution. And when I started to research other apps and things of that nature, there wasn't really an app that focused on frequency. So I ended up creating my own, and that started High Frequency Highway. It really started off as like a side project, and it started to develop into more and more. And then we recently launched our wearable that has taken a lot of success as well.
Right. So if I had filmed you on day one that you decided to build high frequency highway, what would we see on your face, on your body that told us that something has shifted?
Hmm. Yeah, if you were to be filming me the day I made High Frequency Highway, it's actually a pretty funny story because I was working with like this startup at the time as like head of growth, and I got let go from that job. And the last check that they gave me, I put it all into High Frequency Highway. So, you would see somebody that is determined to be successful, right? You would see somebody that is in a state of bliss, honestly, because it felt like I'm in that state of like everything happens for a reason, right? When I got that email that said, "Oh, you're terminated," I smiled. I kind of felt almost like freedom in a way where it's like, wow, I don't have the obligation anymore. I have this final check. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to invest into creating my own business, creating my own product. And now I'm here today working on it still.
Right. So talk to us about what is it you do at high frequency?
Yeah, yeah. So High Frequency Highway is an app and a wearable that helps people shift their state. So whether you need to be in a focused state or a flow state, we have different frequencies to help you tap into that. So it's something called binaural beats. So it's where you actually have one frequency in this ear, another frequency in the other ear, and then they meet together in the middle of your brain as the absolute difference of the frequencies, and that starts to basically influence your brain. So your brain always wants to be in a state of like homeostasis. So whatever you're basically putting inside of your brain is going to try to match that frequency. So let's say you want to be focused, you want to tap into the gamma frequencies, right? And then our wearable, it basically makes it more effective because it's actually transmitting the frequency through your bone, and it directly stimulates your brain, and what we coined as an instant shift. You can see like videos on our socials of like people's eyes widen as soon as we turn on the frequency, their spine becomes erect and things of that nature. So the reason I even named it High Frequency Highway is because it's a way to shift into different states. Most people, to go into a different state physically, you take a highway, but this is a high frequency highway where we're taking your brain to different states, right? So yeah.
Oh, well, that's very curative. I would not have even thought about that why it's named that way. I just thought it's something to do with the frequencies. Interesting. So take us inside one specific Olympic level moment where you've been in that moment and you're thinking, if I don't shift my state, I might lose. And what is the thing you had to do when nobody could see to just bring you back to that moment of we got to win?
Yeah, yeah. So honestly, like when I was trying out for the like Team USA, and we were doing scrimmages outside and it was pouring rain, right? And I was not used to, of course, training in the rain. Most people aren't. So, you have to really take that moment and center yourself and know that you're meant for those moments. And even rain or shine, I have to go out there and perform at my best, right? So I think if you allow the external world to shift your internal world, that's when you can really run into some problems. But in reality, it's about how you process the moment. It's not about what's happening in the moment, it's about how you process it. And that's what's going to shift your frequency into the ideal state you want to be in.
Great. So in elite sport, which uh, you live in that world, but in elite sport, you either live and die by the clock and the scores on the board. Then you flip on the other side as the CEO. What are some invisible scoreboards that you watch to know if you're winning or losing? Even a CEO, that if you were to right now coach a CEO, you'd say some invisible scoreboards that they need to watch to know if they're winning or losing in their own state.
Yeah, yeah, good question. Um, I would say like how much your team respects you, how much your team is showing up, and how well is your culture when you're not down your team's back, right? So that's something that I've had to learn over the years, especially as a young founder whose, engineers and team is basically all older than me. I have to kind of position myself and be intentional with how I speak, how I move within the company, so that way I can have retention with my employees. So I think that's been a major key in our success, is having people that have been on the team for years and knowing the product and things of that nature, and not only just retention with your employees but also retention with your customers. How long are people sticking around talking about your product? Are people even talking about your product outside of you and the customer itself? Are they telling their friends? Are they telling their family about what your product is doing for them? And I think word of mouth can be one of the biggest drivers of success for a business, because one customer can become an ambassador that leads to a dozen more customers, right? So I think retention with employees and customers is a major key that you can kind of tone in on to really like measure your success.
Amazing. Again, those parallels of being in sports and being in the boardroom. What are some similarities you see? What are some really transferable skills that you've taken off the field into the boardroom?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think consistency, right? Showing up every day and adding ones and zeros onto like your goal, right? Whether it's pushing code every day, pushing a piece of content every day, or if it's doing 100 push-ups every day. It's like consistency never fails to show up, right? If you're doing something every day for years and years, it's bound for that success to show. And I think in my own journey as an athlete, you know, the first couple years of me training hard, I didn't see that success. But after year 4, year 5, if those things compound into that big moment of me becoming number one in the nation, right? It may have seemed like it happened in one season, but in reality, there was years and years and years of training that led to that moment. And I think there's always a path to that goal, right? You gotta think of, okay, where do I see myself in the future, and then how can I then map out the plan and strategy to make that future a reality. And then now all I have to do is execute on that plan and that strategy to make that inevitable. And one thing that I love to preach is that I make my success inevitable, right? Because of the actions that I'm taking on a day-to-day basis, right? If I wake up and I train every single day, if I wake up and I, do something towards my product every single day, my product is inevitably going to become better, and then my athleticism is inevitably going to become better because I'm doing the things that it takes to get to that, goal.
I love that. I love that you make your own success inevitable because you're taking action and consistency. I think it's amazes me how success is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. But we take those really simple concepts, we want to make them complex. But if we were to do, as you said, the things we need to do every day, we would go really, really far. So here at Human Edge, we talk really consistently about belonging and how feeling seen and heard and valued is really important, but also about culture. And I'll lean into culture a little bit because you did talk about culture. But what is really happening energetically in a room when a leader, the CEO, walks in dysregulated but is high performing on
Mm.
paper?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's gonna show in like in blimps, right? In little blips of whether he yells at somebody unintentionally that didn't need to be yelled at, or he doesn't have that balance at home, right? Um, I think frequency, I know that this is coming from somebody that has a frequency company, but frequency is everything, right? Like we all have these auras that we emit that we can't necessarily always perceive, but energetically people are feeling that energy. So, for instance, if you are in that realm, somebody on your team may not have um may not feel that they can speak up to you about a certain topic that could potentially move the product forward because they're in fear of how you may react, right? So if your energetic level isn't there where you can be receptive and things of that nature, then you can honestly slow down the speed of your company, right? I think I work on my frequency every day, and I swear it's allowed us to take quantum leaps into, the development of our product, the partners we were able to attract, and the things of that nature that has inevitably accelerated our success. And it's because I'm always open and receptive to people, and people are willing to talk about me in rooms, right? If people aren't talking about you in spaces you're not in, then it's going to be harder for you to grow your company, and people that are in that sort of energy, people may not want to be associated with you outside of the company. They may not want to talk about your name in other rooms because of your energy. So I think, yeah, like it slows down the speed of your company.
Right. So being energetically there, being in flow, being attuned to the frequency requires a level of presence. And
Mm.
presence sometimes does call us to be still, to just listen to the whisper because we hear so much noise, and so we're not able to tune in to that, and that what you're talking about, flow and state. So you work with a lot of billionaires, pro athletes, and people who are doing great in life and they're achieving. When you're having this conversation, what are some of the things they're really afraid of when you talk about regulating and starting to slow down to be in flow? What do they confess that they're afraid of?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Hmm. I think most people judge reality off of the physical, right? Especially men. I think when you base reality off of the things that you are like doing or the actions you're taking place, um, that's a very small percentage of what's actually happening behind the scenes. I think they can be in fear of like them not actively seeing that progress, but you never know what's happening behind the scenes when you're really toned in on your frequency. So, doing nothing is something, right? I know we've all had this experience where we're either taking a walk or in the shower, and we get this download of information of creative ideas or things that can accelerate the growth of what you're working on. That's where the magic happens because you actually have the space for that information to come. So, like when you're actively doing something, you don't have the space, right? Your mind is thinking about the action at hand, but when you sit still and are present, you open up that space for the universe to come and give you gems of information. So, when I think people are just in fear of, like, I'm not actively doing something, so I don't necessarily see that progress, but in reality, progress can happen from doing nothing.
Yeah, true. Um, can you think of a leader? And you talked about culture, and culture is so important. And I'll get you to tell us about what you think about culture. But can you think about a leader who you've coached and the culture in their team has changed? What changed? And when I mean change, not because they needed to do anything strategically, because they needed to change their flow and the state they were in to lead.
Yeah, yeah. So, one example, somebody who I was working with, basically, he got one of our frequency devices. We met up, we had a couple sessions, and he actually started to release people from his team. So he could like intuitively start to sense people that may have been weighing his operation down, and was
Mm.
able to basically rehire new people that then transformed a way his business is literally running now. He also saw growth on his social channels and was able to start attracting people naturally from his social media. And I think that all starts within in his energy of people seeing that and wanting to work for him, right? So there's so many cues beyond just like speaking, that people are being receptive to, right? That are going to trigger them to either reach out or want to work with you. So working on that internal energy, you never know who you may attract.
True, true. So, talking about culture, how important is culture, and when did you actually learn that organizational culture, team culture, is really important?
Yeah, yeah, I think culture is extremely important. I've been building companies for a while, and I think in 2020, that's when it really hit for me that every company needs to start with why, right? And understanding your why is such a key to attracting the right people in the right culture. Um, and as somebody that has been bootstrapping companies, getting people to work for you for free, you got to have a certain culture. You got to have a certain vibe, right? Like, people aren't just gonna, if you say, oh, like, I'm gonna create a company and we selling wings. It's like, all right, like, what, like, but when you come to somebody and say, we're changing the world, we're raising the frequency of the planet, we're gonna unlock people's consciousness. People are like, okay, I want to be a part of that. So I really toned in on my why. And when you have a big why, you can attract big people, whether they're former NASA or elite engineers from around the world. If your why is strong enough, they would want a piece of your company and want to work for you for free. And that's something that I've learned on my journey, is like, how you position your company and how people perceive your company will determine, one, if they want to work for you at all, but two, how much they want to work for you, and the energy that's going to drive them. You need to have a strong enough culture and a strong enough why that's going to evoke emotion within somebody, because emotion is what is going to force somebody to take action. So yeah, that's it's such a strong thing that I think some people skip over, and why most companies fail is because the culture is based on money or just very surface level things that you can find anywhere. But when you have a certain culture that's changing the world and is going to be something rare to come across, people are going to think about your company different, and when they working for your company, they're going to have a different set of emotions and passion towards it.
So, some people listening to us, whether they be CEOs, leaders, or just fan listeners that are listening to this, they might be thinking, "Oh my goodness, this sound very woo-woo, frequency, vibration, etc." What is the
Yeah,
simplest, grounded explanation of what you're actually doing to the human nervous system?
I love this question because That's one of my missions, right? I want to bridge that gap between science and spirituality. So when I'm talking about frequency, I'm literally talking about the rate in which your electrons are orbiting around an atom in your cells. So why is that important? That's important because the faster the frequency of that electron, the more light that it emits. And the more light that it emits, the more immune you are to sickness, the more creative you are, the more people are attracted towards you, right? And how do you affect this frequency? So let's think about this in literal terms. Your cells are sitting in a body of liquid or fluid, which could be your blood and could be um, certain chemicals, right? So when you are in a certain emotional state, your neurotransmitter is going to release a certain chemical, right? So whether that's something that's going to cause you to be sleepy or something that's going to cause you to be excited, it's going to release that chemical based on the emotion that you're in. And when it releases that chemical, that is then going to affect your cells and affect the frequency that they're spinning on. So it kind of goes back to one of the first things we were talking about, and how I was saying how like processing information is the key to kind of under like really rewiring your frequency, because the same exact thing could happen to me that happens to somebody else, but if I process it differently, I'm going to release a certain emotion, which is going to release a certain chemical, which is then going to change the certain frequency that my electrons are spinning on. So you can always notice when someone is at a lower frequency, they're taking less action, right? They're not getting out of bed. They're not creative, right? But when someone's at a high frequency, they have infinite energy to do things. They are taking actions towards their goals and things of that nature. So when we're talking about frequency, we're talking literally, right? Because when you're at that higher frequency and your electrons are spinning very, very fast, people can see that glow, and people want to work with someone that has that glow, has that energy, and is bringing that into spaces. So yeah, that's when I'm talking about frequency, that's what I mean. And in such simple states, like there's something called like a frequency chart. So like at the higher frequencies of that chart, you see bliss, you see love, you see joy, you see gratitude. And when you're at those states, that's when you're at a higher frequency to make things happen, and which is going to make your electrons spin faster.
So, with the tech, is this something that you can measure through machines in the lab? What exactly, like if I was to start using your tool, what exactly am I expecting to see?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So it's an app and a wearable, and we have done EEG testing with it. It doesn't come with that, but we have done testing with the tech. But when you experience it, what it's going to do is going to shift your state. So for me, someone that has ADHD, it can shift me from like having a scattered mind to a more structured mind, and a mind that is going to be on the same frequency. So instead of like my mind, different parts of my brain getting activated, it's going to activate one specific part of my brain and keep me there, and it's going to help increase my attention span and my focus, right? And different frequencies put you in different states. So we have also a lot of CEOs that use it for their nighttime routine. So when they want to wind down and stop their like racing thoughts, they put in a theta state, which is going to slow down the frequency of their brain and slowly put them into more of a calm sleep state. So yeah,
So, where do you see the ethical line with this kind of tech?
you said the ethical line. Yeah, I mean, how I see it is it's a non-evasive way to shift your mind, right? Instead of using something that's gonna release chemicals, it's going to just use sound and vibration to influence your brain. We are in an essence almost similar to like a neural link without actually invading inside of your brain and having surgery, right? Sound is one of the best ways to basically influence your brain, and we're just tapping into that in a more precise way.
Great. So we cannot have this conversation without talking about AI. How is AI enhancing your technology?
Yeah. So we have a couple AI features, and we basically can recommend you certain sounds and frequencies based off of our algorithm or based off of your voice. So, for instance, there's a feature where you say a certain affirmation, and we then use your vocal tone to detect your state. So, whether you have like an angry tone, or a sad tone, or a happy tone, we can then detect that and then recommend you a certain sound and frequency to either amplify that or offset that.
Mm.
And then one other AI feature that we have is a personalized meditation. So instead of going on YouTube or Calm app where they have pre-recorded general meditations, with our app you can generate a meditation about anything, and it uses AI, of course, to then generate that in real time. So if you're going through something very specific, you can talk about that, and then in real time it creates a meditation that is going to talk about that exact experience. And in my opinion, that's much more effective because it's going to actually mean something to you, right? It's going to hit on that exact thing that you're going through versus something that's generic for anybody. It's going to really hit home, and it's going to be able to rewire you a lot faster than a general meditation.
Right. So talk to us if somebody was looking for the tech. I'm in Australia. You're in the States. How does this work?
Yeah, if you Google high frequency highway, or you just go to www.highfrequencyhw.com, we are available globally. Our app is actually used in every country on the planet. And we also ship our wearable globally as well.
Right. And what the kind of cost the listeners are looking at, or should they go to the website and interact there?
Yeah, I mean the pricing is pretty straightforward. It's $123. And then the app is a
And
freemium.
does that, yeah? So
Yeah,
does
so
that
the
include the wearable?
So the wearable is 123, but the app is freemium. So like for the app, you download it for free. There's a lot of different free options, but if you want access to everything, there is a premium subscription, which is $6.99 per month or $59 a year.
So if there is something that is less than $200 that is changing the way we do life, the way we lead, you talked about, or like if you're ADHD, what do you think is stopping people?
Um Honestly, nothing is stopping people. We've been selling so many, we keep running out of inventory, so we're honestly trying to keep up with the people and the demand. But you know how I see it is when people try it, they buy it. So that's how we've been able to have billionaires love the tech, pro athletes. We did videos with like will.i.am, and other, A-list people that as soon as they try it, one, they say they never felt anything like it, and two, they ask how can they get it. So it is something that is affordable, and honestly, we've even had customers reach back out to us and say, yo, your product is too low, you need to raise the price of the value, because the value you're giving is honestly way more than what you're charging. But to me, it's like I'm in America, right? And those are American customers, but somebody else somewhere else, $123 might be a premium fee for them. So right now, that's our pricing. We may go up just depending on the demand and if we honestly can't keep up. But at this time and date, we're at $123.
Right. What is the one pattern in your own state you're still wrestling with today, even with your own tools and training?
I'm gonna be vulnerable and just say lust. Like I think it's it's something that I think a lot of men, I don't know about women, but I can just speak for the men here, that we deal with. And like I necessarily don't want to deal with that, but it's real, like so I would say like that's something I'm continuing to work on and be more disciplined with. I'm pretty disciplined in like all other aspects of my life, but yeah, that's one that I'm working on.
That's a problem with athlete and when you're led by testosterone.
No, literally though, like they say when you're healthy, you're horny, and I'm like, well, shoot, man.
Yeah, but it is good. It's a good problem to have, as long as you can, and if you have discipline on the field, I think that can transfer into the rest of the of your life. It's
Right.
amazes me because I see a lot of pro athlete. Like, my goodness, it takes discipline to be on the
Yeah.
field, to do what it is that you do, and then you watch they're caught up in, and I'm like, how are you on the news for such?
Yeah, it's a hard world out here, I guess.
Lovely, lovely. I would really love to get your tech and be able to come back to the listeners and be able to say what has been the difference between now and when I use it, and then potentially we can come back for another episode and be able to even demonstrate it live in what how people change their states live. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving me your time. Is there a question or something that you would like to say to wrap this up? If you are on a billboard, what would that billboard say about today's catch up?
Yeah, I mean, my slogan is like, let's raise the frequency. You know, it's time to raise
Mm.
the frequency, and raising the frequency starts with each individual. So if I hope this podcast help somebody rewire their mind and want to take those steps to raise their own personal frequency, because it starts with each individual. So let's get to it.
Thank you. Have a good one. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Of course, no problem.